The wars between Ireland and the Vikings, you see, were not simply foreign invasions. They were complex conflicts that transformed Ireland from a collection of scattered Celtic kingdoms into something resembling a unified nation. These wars, spanning over 2 centuries from the late 8th century to the early 11th century, would reshape Irish society, politics, and culture in ways that echo through Irish history to this very day. The first Viking raid on Irish soil, historians tell us, occurred in 795 CE, when Norse longships attacked the island of Rathlin, off the northeast coast of Ireland. But this was not an isolated incident. It was the beginning of what would become a systematic campaign of raiding, settlement, and eventually, integration that would change the very nature of Irish civilization. Medieval Irish annals, written by monks and clerics who were among the eyewitnesses, record this first Viking raid in 795 CE, when the island of Rathlin, off the northeast coast of the mainland, and the great monastery of St. Columba on the island of Iona were attacked by strangers. These were not just random pirates. These were organized military expeditions launched by Norwegian and Danish warriors who saw Ireland's wealthy monasteries as irresistible targets. The Vikings, you must understand, were drawn to Ireland for very specific reasons. Irish monasteries were repositories of incredible wealth: gold, silver, precious manuscripts, and religious artifacts that had been accumulating for centuries. More importantly, these monasteries were largely undefended, their inhabitants being monks devoted to prayer and scholarship rather than warfare. Irish society at the time of the first Viking raids was politically fragmented, consisting of dozens of small kingdoms, each ruled by local kings who owed allegiance to regional overkings. This political fragmentation, while creating a rich and complex Celtic culture, also made Ireland vulnerable to outside attack because there was no unified defense against foreign invasion. The early Viking raids, from 795 to approximately 840 CE, followed a predictable pattern. Longships would appear suddenly off the Irish coast. Viking warriors would storm ashore, attack monasteries or coastal settlements, seize whatever valuables they could carry, capture slaves, and disappear before any organized Irish response could be mounted. But around 841 CE, the nature of the Viking presence in Ireland changed dramatically. Instead of simply raiding and retreating, the Vikings established their first permanent settlement at Dublin, creating what would become one of Ireland's most important cities. This Viking settlement served not only as a base for further raids, but also as a thriving trading hub that connected Ireland to the broader Norse world. The establishment of Dublin and other Viking towns such as Waterford, Wexford, and Limerick marked the beginning of a new phase in Irish-Viking relations. These were not temporary raiding bases. These were permanent settlements where Vikings planned to stay, to build communities, to establish families, and to create a lasting Norse presence in Ireland. Viking ports were established at Dublin, Wexford, Waterford, Cork, and Limerick, which became the first large towns in Ireland. This was revolutionary for Irish society, which had been primarily rural and tribal. The concept of urban centers, of permanent markets, of specialized craftsmen and traders, all were introduced to Ireland by Viking settlers. The Irish response to permanent Viking settlement was complex and varied. Some Irish kings saw opportunities for alliance with these powerful new neighbors. Others viewed the Viking settlements as existential threats that had to be eliminated. Most Irish rulers pursued pragmatic policies that combined resistance and cooperation depending on circumstances. By the early 10th century, Norse lands included the towns and surrounding areas of Wexford, Waterford, Cork, and Limerick, with intermarriage among the Irish producing the Norse Gaels. This cultural blending created a unique hybrid society that was neither fully Irish nor fully Viking, but something entirely new in European history. The emergence of these Norse Gaels, people of mixed Irish and Viking ancestry, complicated the simple narrative of Irish versus Viking conflict. Many of these mixed communities had loyalties that crossed ethnic and cultural lines, making the conflicts of the 10th and 11th centuries as much civil wars as foreign invasions. The most famous of all Irish Viking conflicts was the Battle of Clontarf, fought on Good Friday, April 23, 1014. This battle, more than any other single event, has come to symbolize Ireland's struggle against Viking domination, though the reality was far more complex than popular history suggests. The Battle of Clontarf pitched the forces of the Munster over King Brian Boru and his allies against the armies of North Leinster, Dublin, and Viking mercenaries and allies from across the sea. But modern historians emphasize that this was not simply a conflict between Irish and Vikings. It was an Irish civil war in which Brian Boru's Munster and its allies defeated Leinster and Dublin, and there were Vikings fighting on both sides. Brian Boru, King of Munster and self-proclaimed High King of Ireland, had spent decades building alliances and conquering rivals in his quest to unite Ireland under his rule. By 1013, his grip on power was faltering, and a rebellion in the east of Ireland, supported by Viking allies, culminated in the Battle of Clontarf. The events that took place at the Battle of Clontarf were the culmination of 2 centuries of strife, treachery, failed alliances, and treaties between the Irish Celtic chieftains and the invading Norsemen. But the battle itself was not the simple victory of Irish Christianity over Viking paganism that later legend would claim. The battle probably took place a few kilometers outside medieval Dublin, east of where the Tolka River flows into the north of Dublin Bay. Brian's forces engaged their Dublin and Leinster enemies, who had crossed the Tolka River to link up with a Viking fleet in the bay. The Annals of Ulster report that a valiant battle was fought between them, the like of which was never before encountered. Brian's enemies were routed. 6,000 were reportedly killed or drowned, but Brian himself was killed during the battle, probably while praying in his tent, struck down by fleeing Vikings who discovered the elderly king undefended. His death turned what should have been a moment of triumph into a tragedy that would haunt Irish politics for generations. The Battle of Clontarf was victorious for Brian's forces, but it was a Pyrrhic victory that left Ireland without strong leadership, precisely when unity was most needed. Brian's death marked the end of the most serious attempt to create a unified Irish kingdom during the medieval period. Despite the fame of Clontarf, it was not the end of Viking presence in Ireland. Viking-descended families continued to rule Dublin, and Norse Gaelic communities remained important parts of Irish society. The battle marked the end of Viking expansion in Ireland, but not the end of Viking influence on Irish culture and politics. The wars between Ireland and the Vikings had consequences that extended far beyond military victories and defeats. The Vikings introduced urban civilization to Ireland, creating the first real towns and cities in Irish history. They brought new technologies, new trade connections, and new cultural influences that enriched Irish civilization. Viking Ireland also became a crucial link in the broader Norse world, connecting Scandinavia with Viking settlements in Britain, Iceland, and even North America. Irish Vikings participated in expeditions to the Mediterranean, to Constantinople, and to the New World, making Ireland part of a global Viking network. The integration of Viking settlers into Irish society created new forms of art, literature, and culture that combined Celtic and Norse traditions. Viking craftsmanship influenced Irish metalwork, wood carving, and stone sculpture. Norse literary traditions merged with Irish storytelling to create new forms of saga and chronicle. Militarily, the wars with the Vikings forced the Irish to develop new tactics and strategies. Irish armies learned to fight mounted opponents, to conduct siege warfare, and to coordinate large-scale military campaigns. These military innovations would prove crucial in later conflicts with Anglo-Norman invaders. The political impact of the Viking Wars was equally profound. The need to resist Viking attacks forced Irish kingdoms to cooperate in unprecedented ways. Regional overkings like Brian Boru were able to build larger political units by appealing to common defense against foreign invaders. The religious consequences of the Viking Wars were complex and lasting. While Vikings were initially pagan raiders who attacked Christian monasteries, many Viking settlers eventually converted to Christianity and became integrated into Irish religious life. Some of Ireland's most important medieval churches were built in Viking settlements. The economic transformation of Ireland during the Viking period was revolutionary. Viking traders introduced Ireland to international markets, new forms of currency, and commercial practices that had been unknown in traditional Irish society. Irish products, particularly slaves, precious metals, and livestock, became valuable commodities in Viking trade networks. The cultural legacy of Ireland's wars with the Vikings includes some of the most famous stories in Irish literature. The tales of Brian Boru, the sagas of Viking heroes, and the chronicles of medieval battles became foundational myths that shaped Irish national identity for centuries. Archaeological evidence from Viking Age Ireland reveals the extent of cultural mixing between Irish and Norse populations. Viking burial sites contain Irish artifacts, Irish sites contain Viking goods, and the material culture of the period shows extensive cross-cultural influence. The end of the Viking Age in Ireland came not with a single decisive battle, but through gradual assimilation and integration. By the 12th century, most Viking families in Ireland had become thoroughly Hibernicized, adopting Irish names, Irish customs, and Irish political allegiances. The arrival of Anglo-Norman invaders in 1169 created new challenges that united Irish and Norse-Irish populations against a common enemy. Many Viking-descended families fought alongside Gaelic Irish armies against the Anglo-Normans, completing the process of integration that had begun centuries earlier. The towns that Vikings established in Ireland, Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Wexford, and Limerick, remained crucial centers of Irish political and economic life throughout the medieval period and beyond. These cities became the foundation of medieval Irish commerce and administration. The genetic legacy of the Viking presence in Ireland is still detectable today. DNA studies show significant Scandinavian ancestry in Irish populations, particularly in areas where Viking settlement was heaviest. This genetic evidence confirms the extent of Viking integration into Irish society. Modern Ireland's relationship with its Viking past is complex and evolving. While traditional Irish nationalism emphasized resistance to foreign invasion, contemporary scholarship recognizes the positive contributions of Viking settlers to Irish development. Viking heritage sites, museums, and festivals celebrate the Norse contribution to Irish culture. The wars between Ireland and the Vikings represent a crucial chapter in European medieval history, demonstrating how conflict, settlement, and integration could transform entire societies. These wars created the foundation for modern Irish urban civilization, while preserving and enriching traditional Irish culture. Understanding Ireland's wars with the Vikings requires recognizing that these conflicts were not simply foreign invasions, but complex processes of cultural contact, political transformation, and social development that created the Ireland we know today. The Vikings were both enemies and partners, destroyers and builders, foreigners and Irishmen, in a story that defies simple categorization but reveals the rich complexity of medieval Irish history.